73,000 copies in 1 week, a Metacritic score that defied expectations, and a canonical Zelda story that fans had waited years to experience. 1 month ago, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment launched exclusively on the Nintendo Switch 2, and the question everyone's asking now is whether this ambitious prequel actually delivered on its massive promise. When Nintendo announced Age of Imprisonment back in April 2025 during the Nintendo Direct that introduced the Switch 2 console, the stakes were immediately clear. This wasn't going to be another what-if scenario like Age of Calamity. Nintendo and Koei Tecmo made an unprecedented commitment. This game would be completely canonical, telling the true story of the imprisoning war that players glimpsed only briefly in Tears of the Kingdom's Dragon Tier memories. The developers weren't just creating another Warriors spin-off, they were expanding one of gaming's most beloved franchises with official lore that would permanently become part of Zelda history. That announcement generated enormous anticipation, but it also created immense pressure. Age of Calamity had taken liberties with Breath of the Wild's backstory, ultimately creating an alternate timeline that, while entertaining, left many fans unsatisfied. The game's time travel mechanics resulted in a happy ending that contradicted the tragic past players knew from Breath of the Wild's memories. For Age of Imprisonment to succeed, it needed to respect established canon while delivering the hack-and-slash action that Warriors games are known for. It needed to run smoothly on new hardware, and critically, it needed to justify its existence as a Switch 2 exclusive during the console's crucial early months. So, after 1 month on the market, how did Age of Imprisonment actually perform? The answer requires examining multiple dimensions: sales figures, critical reception, technical performance, player satisfaction, and the game's impact on both the Zelda franchise and the Switch 2's growing library. The sales story begins in Japan, where Famitsu reported that Age of Imprisonment sold 73,183 physical copies during its first week. That figure placed the game at the top of Japan's physical sales chart for the week of November 3rd through 9th, making it the best-selling retail game in the country during its launch period. These numbers represent physical sales only. Download cards and pre-installed versions are included, but pure digital sales from the eShop are not tracked by Famitsu, meaning the actual total is likely significantly higher. Context matters when evaluating these figures. Age of Imprisonment launched exclusively on the Switch 2, a console that had only been on the market since May 2025. By the time Age of Imprisonment released in early November, the Switch 2 had sold approximately 2.6 million units in Japan. Compare that to previous Hyrule Warriors releases. The original Hyrule Warriors launched on Wii U in August 2014, when that console had sold around 2 million units in Japan by November. Age of Calamity, meanwhile, launched on the original Switch in November 2020, more than 3 years into that console's life cycle, when the install base was massively larger. Given the relatively small Switch 2 install base, 73,000 physical copies in 1 week represents strong attach rate performance. The game appealed to a significant portion of early Switch 2 adopters, suggesting that the Zelda brand and the promise of canonical storytelling drove purchasing decisions. Industry observers noted that while absolute numbers might seem modest compared to massive releases like Pokémon or Mario Kart, the ratio of sales to available consoles indicated healthy demand. Outside Japan, specific sales data remains less accessible, as Nintendo typically doesn't release regional breakdowns immediately after launch. However, Age of Imprisonment did chart in the UK at number 5 during its debut week, appearing behind established titles like EA Sports FC 26 and Football Manager 26, but performing respectably for a new IP on new hardware. The UK chart position suggested the game found its audience in Western markets, though perhaps not quite with the same intensity as in Japan, where Warriors-style games traditionally perform strongest. The critical reception tells a more nuanced story. Age of Imprisonment currently holds a Metacritic score of 78 based on 52 critic reviews, with OpenCritic showing a similar 77, classified as strong approval. Famitsu of Japan awarded the game 35 out of 40 points from 4 critics, indicating generally positive sentiment across different gaming cultures. That 78 Metacritic score places Age of Imprisonment as the highest-rated game in the Hyrule Warriors subseries, narrowly edging out both the original Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition and Age of Calamity, which both scored 78 as well. While the difference is marginal, it suggests the development team successfully incorporated lessons from previous entries. Nintendo Life awarded the game 9 out of 10, calling it a stunning slice of action and the best entry in this spin-off franchise to date. The review praised the combat depth, the integration of Zonai devices from Tears of the Kingdom, character variety through sync strikes, and the smooth technical performance on Switch 2 hardware. Gamer Actor UK similarly gave the game 9 out of 10, stating that Koei Tecmo reaffirms that it delivers some extra quality when it comes to Nintendo IP, and this is an even better game compared to Age of Calamity. The review highlighted production values that sometimes compete with mainline Zelda titles, deeper narrative and gameplay compared to previous entries, and strong performance and loading times that make the game a joy to play. RPG Site echoed similar sentiments, praising Age of Imprisonment as an excellent Warriors title with an unambiguously canon story that is no funny business, directly addressing fan concerns about alternate timelines. VGC awarded the game 8 out of 10, noting that Age of Imprisonment may be the most serious of the Hyrule Warriors games to date, but it's also the one with the most engaging and rewarding combat. GameSpot, while more reserved at 7 out of 10, still acknowledged that by ironing out its predecessor's performance issues and introducing a varied roster of rewarding characters, Age of Imprisonment marks a high point for the spin-off series thus far. Not all reviews were universally glowing. Metro Game Central delivered a harsh 4 out of 10, calling the game insanely repetitive, horribly shallow, and pointlessly easy. This is the absolute least interesting thing to do with Zelda on the Switch 2, and bad even by the low standards of the Dynasty Warriors franchise. Games Radar gave the game 3 out of 5, citing underutilized spaces and bland maps with many missions lacking depth, though they did acknowledge the combat was sharply improved compared to previous Hyrule Warriors games.
Those who appreciate the genre's core loop, fighting massive hordes of enemies, capturing strategic points, and building up devastating combo attacks, praised Age of Imprisoment's refinements and additions. Reviewers who find the Warriors formula inherently repetitive remained unconvinced, even with Zelda theming and canonical storytelling added to the mix. Technical performance became a major talking point, particularly given that this was the first major Zelda-related release on Switch 2 hardware. Digital Foundry provided an in-depth technical analysis, revealing that Age of Imprisonment uses dynamic resolution scaling. In docked mode, the game renders between 720 and 900p, while handheld mode delivers between 468 and 648p. These resolution targets might sound low on paper, but Digital Foundry noted they're pretty good considering the effects-heavy gameplay. The Switch 2's improved specifications allow Age of Imprisonment to render numerous overlapping visual effects alongside dozens upon dozens of enemies simultaneously, all while maintaining 60 frames per second for the majority of gameplay. Enemy complexity increased substantially compared to Age of Calamity, and multiple effects light up the surrounding terrain impressively during combat. Digital Foundry acknowledged that frame rate drops occur during particularly intense moments, but these dips remain brief and don't significantly impact playability. Players generally responded positively to the technical presentation. Community feedback on Nintendo Life, social media, and gaming forums emphasized that while absolute numbers might not match native 4K expectations some had for next-generation hardware, the game looks and feels excellent in motion. The 60 FPS target makes combat responsive and satisfying, which matters more for this genre than raw resolution numbers. Multiple players mentioned that only after reading Digital Foundry's analysis did they even realize the resolution varied. During actual gameplay, the experience felt consistently smooth and visually impressive. The file size exceeds 40 gigabytes, reflecting the game's substantial content and high-quality assets. Loading times received universal praise, with transitions between missions and menus happening quickly enough to maintain gameplay flow. This represented a significant improvement over Age of Calamity, which suffered from lengthy load times on the original Switch that could break immersion during extended play sessions. Perhaps the most crucial element determining Age of Imprisoment's success is how well it delivers on its promise of canonical storytelling. Players who completed Tears of the Kingdom came to Age of Imprisonment wanting answers. What exactly happened during the imprisoning war? How did Zelda spend her time in the ancient past? What were the relationships between Rauru, Mineru, Sonia, and the ancient sages? How did Ganondorf's transformation into the Demon King actually unfold? Based on player reactions across social media, YouTube comments, and gaming forums, Age of Imprisonment largely succeeded in fulfilling these narrative expectations. The game expands significantly on the brief glimpses provided in Tears of the Kingdom's Dragon Tier memories, showing entire battles, character interactions, and plot developments that were only alluded to previously. Zelda's relationship with Queen Sonia receives substantial development, showing their training sessions where Zelda learns to better control her time powers. Mineru's character becomes far more fleshed out, revealing her research into constructs and Zonai technology. The introduction of new characters like Kalamo the Korok and the various tribal leaders provides additional depth to the era. Players particularly responded to how the game handles tragic moments. Unlike Age of Calamity's timeline alteration happy ending, Age of Imprisonment doesn't shy away from the canonical tragedies that must occur. Queen Sonia's death happens as Tears of the Kingdom established, and the game treats this moment with appropriate weight and consequences. Multiple reviewers specifically mentioned being moved by the game's conclusion. RPG Site stated that Age of Imprisonment culminates in a conclusion that stands among the Zelda series' very best and one that I foresee players talking about very fondly in the years to come. Players who were disappointed by Age of Calamity's alternate timeline ending expressed relief and satisfaction that Age of Imprisonment respects established canon throughout. The Knight Construct character, a mysterious machine powered by a Master Sword fragment that takes on Link-like characteristics, became one of the game's most discussed elements. This clever solution allowed the developers to include Link-style gameplay while maintaining canonical consistency. Since Link couldn't have participated in the imprisoning war, having a construct animated by the Sacred Blade's power provides hack-and-slash action without breaking continuity. Player reception of this character remained mostly positive, with many praising the creative approach to the Link problem. Gameplay refinements over previous Hyrule Warriors entries received consistent praise. The integration of Zonai devices from Tears of the Kingdom adds strategic depth to combat. Players can use flame emitters to exploit enemy weaknesses, deploy time bombs for area control, and combine various devices to create devastating combinations. This integration feels natural rather than forced, making Age of Imprisonment feel like a genuine extension of Tears of the Kingdom's mechanics rather than a separate experience that merely borrows the Zelda name. The Sync Strike system, allowing two characters to combine for powerful cooperative attacks, addresses complaints from previous Warriors games about ally characters feeling useless. Different character combinations produce unique Sync Strikes, encouraging players to experiment with various team compositions. Special character pairings unlock exclusive Sync Strikes with additional visual flair and power, rewarding players who engage deeply with the roster. The character roster itself spans across Tears of the Kingdom lore: Princess Zelda, King Rauru, Queen Sonia, Sage Mineru, the ancient sages representing each race, the mysterious Knight Construct, and Kalamo the Korok. Each character features unique movesets and feels distinctly different to play. Reviews consistently mention that unlike some Warriors games where characters feel interchangeable, aside from cosmetic differences, Age of Imprisonment's roster offers genuine variety in combat approach and strategy. Mission variety received more mixed feedback. While combat mechanics earned praise, some reviewers and players criticized map layouts for being relatively bland compared to Age of Calamity's more diverse battlefields. Several reviews specifically mentioned that missions often involve similar objectives: capture outposts, defeat specified enemy counts, take down commanders, without enough unique mechanics to differentiate them. This represents a traditional Warriors genre weakness that Age of Imprisonment doesn't fully solve, even with its other improvements. Post-launch support demonstrates Nintendo and Koei Tecmo's confidence in the game's success. Just 3 weeks after release, Age of Imprisonment received its first free content update on November 27, 2025. This update added new challenges and quests for players who completed the main story, introduced vicious enemy variants of bokoblins and sludge-likes with enhanced difficulty, provided new weapons including the Longsword of Light and High Guard's Spear, and implemented exclusive sync strikes for Zelda and Kalamo alongside new Flux Construct sync strikes.
The update also fixed multiple bugs, improved tutorials, added warning sounds for certain abilities, and addressed issues with the game share feature that allows two players to enjoy co-op using a single game copy. The speed and substance of this update suggests strong developer commitment to maintaining and improving the game based on player feedback. Prior to launch, the official Zelda Musu social media account announced plans for 2 free updates, allowing fans to enjoy the experience for even longer. While paid DLC hasn't been officially confirmed, both previous Hyrule Warriors games received substantial expansion passes, adding new characters, missions, and story content. Given Age of Imprisoment's positive reception and Nintendo's typical DLC strategy for successful titles, paid expansions seem likely in 2026. Community engagement remained robust throughout the first month. Social media platforms showed consistent discussion about strategies, favorite characters, lore implications, and gameplay moments. YouTube content creators produced guides, character analyses, and lore deep dives. The Nintendo Life community poll, asking readers to rate the game, showed strong positive sentiment, with many players giving scores between 7 and 9 out of 10. The game share feature, which allows one Switch 2 owner to share the game with another player for local or online co-op without requiring a second purchase, received significant attention as a standout feature. This represents Nintendo's most generous multiplayer sharing implementation yet, and players praised the accessibility it provides. The feature works for split-screen local co-op, local wireless play between 2 Switch 2 consoles, and even online play between 2 Switch 2 systems using game chat. The only limitation is that co-op mode runs at 30 frames per second rather than 60, which reviewers noted as acceptable given the added complexity of rendering 2-player perspectives. The lack of traditional online matchmaking, players can only do co-op with game share with someone they know, disappointed some players who wanted to team up with strangers online. However, this limitation aligns with Nintendo's general philosophy of prioritizing local and friend-based multiplayer over anonymous online matchmaking. For the Switch 2 console itself, Age of Imprisonment served as an important early exclusive. Launching just 6 months after the console's debut, the game provided a substantial, high-quality experience that could drive hardware purchases among Zelda fans. While not a system seller on the level of a mainline Zelda release, Age of Imprisonment demonstrated the Switch 2's capabilities and offered early adopters a meaty game to justify their investment in new hardware. The game's position as the first major canonical Zelda content on Switch 2 carries significance. It establishes that Nintendo views the Switch 2 as capable of hosting important franchise entries, not just ports and spin-offs. Future Zelda releases, whatever form they take, will benefit from the technical groundwork and performance targets that Age of Imprisonment established. Comparing Age of Imprisonment's first month to Age of Calamity's 2020 launch provides valuable context. Age of Calamity sold approximately 3.5 million copies in its first few months, according to Nintendo's financial reports, benefiting from a massive Switch install base, holiday timing, and enormous anticipation following Breath of the Wild's success. Age of Imprisonment launched into a much smaller potential market with the Switch 2's limited install base, making direct sales comparisons somewhat unfair. However, the attach rate, the percentage of console owners who purchased the game, appears strong for Age of Imprisonment. If we assume digital sales roughly match or exceed physical sales, a reasonable assumption given increasing digital adoption, the game likely sold well over 150,000 copies in Japan alone during its first week. Across global markets, first-month sales potentially reached several 100,000 copies. While these numbers pale in comparison to Age of Calamity's multi-million performance, they represent healthy sales given the hardware limitations. Player retention appears solid based on community engagement metrics. Subreddits and Discord servers focused on the game maintained active discussion throughout November. The first update arriving just 3 weeks post-launch suggests Nintendo saw enough engagement to justify immediate additional content. Players who completed the roughly 10 to 15 hour main story found substantial post-game content in side missions, character upgrades, and weapon improvements that extended playtime significantly. The game's greatest achievement may be its handling of canon integration. Unlike Age of Calamity, which required mental gymnastics to reconcile its alternate timeline with Breath of the Wild's established tragic past, Age of Imprisonment slots seamlessly into Tears of the Kingdom's timeline. Every major event players experience in Dragon Tear Memories happens in Age of Imprisonment, but now with full context, extended scenes, and character development that enriches the overall narrative. This canon legitimacy elevates Age of Imprisonment above typical Warrior spin-offs.
It's not just a fun action game using Zelda characters, it's actually required viewing for players who want the complete Tears of the Kingdom story. The game reveals crucial details about character relationships, explains how certain ancient structures came to exist, and provides emotional weight to moments that were only briefly glimpsed in the main game. For franchise purists who initially questioned whether a Warriors game should carry canon weight, Age of Imprisonment largely justified its existence through respectful execution. The game never contradicts established lore, takes character personalities seriously rather than treating them as action figure versions of themselves, and maintains tonal consistency with Tears of the Kingdom's more serious approach to storytelling. Criticisms that persisted through the first month centered on issues inherent to the Warriors genre itself. Players who don't enjoy repetitive hack-and-slash combat found little here to change their minds, even with Zelda theming. Mission objectives lack the variety and creativity found in mainline Zelda games, which prioritize puzzles and exploration over combat. The game structure, select mission from menu, complete objectives, return to menu, repeat, feels more limited than the open-world freedom Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom popularized. Some players expressed disappointment that certain Tears of the Kingdom characters don't appear as playable fighters. Notably absent is Queen Sonia as a playable character, though narrative reasons explain this decision. Adding her as playable would create strange scenarios where players control her during missions that occur after her canonical death. Similarly, Ganondorf himself isn't playable, maintaining the game's focus on the heroes fighting against him rather than allowing players to experience his perspective. The price point, a full $60 release, prompted debate about value. Some players felt that Warriors games, given their repetitive nature and relatively straightforward structure, don't warrant premium pricing.
Others argued that the substantial content, high production values matching mainline Zelda quality, canonical story significance, and strong technical performance justified the cost. This debate largely came down to individual preferences regarding Warriors gameplay and how much value players place on canonical Zelda storytelling. Environmental variety became a recurring criticism. While the game recreates ancient Hyrule beautifully, many mission maps reuse similar locations with minor variations. Players fighting through the same forested areas or depths caverns multiple times noted the lack of visual diversity compared to Tears of the Kingdom's vast world. Some reviews specifically mentioned wishing for more unique environmental mechanics tied to specific locations, hazards, interactive elements, or terrain that changes how battles play out. The easy difficulty on normal mode disappointed players seeking serious challenge. Multiple reviews and player comments recommended immediately starting on hard difficulty to avoid breezing through missions without meaningful risk. Warriors games traditionally offer power fantasy where players mow down hundreds of weak enemies, but Age of Imprisonment perhaps tilted too far toward accessibility at default settings. The post-launch update adding vicious enemy variants addresses this somewhat, providing tougher encounters for players who completed the initial campaign. Looking forward, Age of Imprisonment's first month suggests a successful launch that met reasonable expectations without becoming a runaway phenomenon. The game found its audience: Zelda fans who wanted canonical story expansion, and Warriors fans who enjoy the core gameplay loop. It sold respectably given hardware constraints, received critical scores indicating quality execution, ran smoothly unswitched to hardware, and delivered the canonical storytelling it promised. The question of long-term success depends partly on future support. If Nintendo and Koei Tecmo release substantial DLC, adding new characters, missions, and story content, Age of Imprisonment could maintain relevance well into 2026. The precedent set by extensive DLC for both previous Hyrule Warriors games makes this likely. Potential additions might include playable characters from other Tears of the Kingdom timeframes, additional story chapters exploring unresolved plot threads, or challenge modes offering alternative gameplay experiences. The game also benefits from Switch 2's growing install base. As more players purchase the console throughout the holiday season and into 2026, Age of Imprisoment's potential market expands. Games with strong word of mouth often demonstrate long-tail sales that continue well after launch month. If positive player impressions translate to recommendations, the game could steadily accumulate sales over time. For the broader Zelda franchise, Age of Imprisonment represents an interesting experiment in transmedia storytelling. Rather than confining important canonical narrative to mainline games alone, Nintendo demonstrated willingness to entrust significant lore expansion to a Warriors spin-off. This approach could set precedent for future Zelda projects that explore different gameplay genres while maintaining narrative legitimacy. The game's success also validates the Switch 2 as a platform capable of delivering experiences that meaningfully improve on its predecessor. The performance improvements, faster loading, and enhanced visual fidelity, while not revolutionary, provide tangible benefits that justify new hardware. As the Switch 2 library expands, Age of Imprisonment will likely be remembered as an important early title that demonstrated the console's capabilities during its crucial launch window. So, did Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment succeed after 1 month? By most meaningful metrics, yes. The game sold well given its circumstances, scored respectably with critics, performed technically as promised, delivered authentic, canonical storytelling, and satisfied the majority of its target audience. It won't convert Warriors genre skeptics, and it doesn't reach the heights of mainline Zelda masterpieces, but it accomplishes exactly what it set out to do: provide Tears of the Kingdom fans with the expanded Imprisoning War story they craved. Wrapped in satisfying hack-and-slash gameplay that takes full advantage of Switch 2 hardware. The game faces an uncertain path to blockbuster status. It's too niche to achieve Mario Kart numbers or Pokemon-level cultural penetration. But success shouldn't be measured solely by sales charts and Metacritic scores. Age of Imprisonment succeeds because it respects its source material, honors player expectations, and delivers a complete, polished experience that enriches one of gaming's greatest franchises. For Zelda enthusiasts eager to experience the Imprisoning War firsthand, for Warriors fans who appreciate refined mechanics and strong production values, and for Switch 2 early adopters seeking substantial exclusive content, Age of Imprisonment provides exactly what was promised. That's perhaps the highest compliment for any game. It does what it says on the tin, and it does it well. 1 month in, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment stands as a successful execution of a challenging concept, a canonical Warriors game that neither betrays its Zelda heritage nor disappoints action fans. Whether that success translates to long-term franchise impact or merely represents a well-made spin-off remains to be seen. But for now, the verdict is clear. Age of Imprisonment succeeded in its mission, delivering the canonical Imprisoning War story that Tears of the Kingdom promised and that fans desperately wanted to experience.